Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Standard Committee on Tuesday, the 13th of July, 2021. Sorry for the slight delay. We had some unavoidable technical problems, so we're running a little bit late. So apologies for that. My name's Councillor Steve Barron. I'll be chairing the meeting up to and including item 3 this evening, which is the election of chair, item 3. I'll now hand over to Mrs. Smith to read out the housekeeping arrangements, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the formal meeting of Standards Committee, held in part via Microsoft Teams. Please note that this meeting of the Standards Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and mute or turn off your microphone when you are not talking. If accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. If a vote is required, unless in relation to agendas item 3 and 4, then the Democratic Services Officer will call out each committee member's name in turn, starting with the Chairman and Vice Chairman, for, against or abstain. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 1, which is apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Stribley, and Councillor Stribley is being substituted by Councillor Kelly tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. We'll move on to item 3, which is election of chairman. Do we have any nominations? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Butt.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Councillor Borthwick. Thank you. Any other nominations?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to nominate Vanessa Ricketts. Also, in nominating her for chair, I would actually like each candidate to give a brief CV, an explanation of their credentials, please.
Would that be appropriate? Sorry, have you got a seconder for Councillor Ricketts? Seconded by Councillor Ricketts. Okay, so Max, can we now cut the... Sorry. Would you, Councillor Butt, would you like to?
Not until the voting is done. I haven't got a speech to link.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ricketts, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, I'd like to explain my experience with standards. I've got nearly 25 years experience as Democratic Services and as Town Clerk. I'm a former Deputy Monitoring Officer and also an Investigating Officer for Standards. I sit on the SLCC's National Panel Board for Standards in Public Life, and I've also been party to the drafting of the new Code of Conduct with the LGA up in Westminster that this council has just adopted at the last council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ricketts. Max, can we now cut the live stream so we can conduct the secret ballot, please? Okay, thank you very much, Max, and welcome back, everybody. I believe now we've got the results of the election of chair, so I'll hand over to Mr. Jones to read out the results. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have the results of the election of Chairman of Standards Committee for 2021-22. Votes are as follows: Councillor Daniel Butt, 5 votes. Councillor Vanessa Ricketts, 2 votes. Councillor Butt is elected Chairman.
Okay, that's lovely. I'm sure we'll do a very good job. Okay, thank you. I'll now vacate the chair.
Thank you. It's the first time being chair. So I'd just like to say, firstly, I'd like to offer my thanks and that of the committee to Councillor Barron for his dedication and role of the chair. I know that I've been a very, very hard act to follow, but I should do my very best to maintain the very high standards that Councillor Barron has set during his time as chair. Thank you, Councillor Barron. I'm sure he's gone now. I would like to also thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to take the role and responsibility as chair of Standards Committee, especially as a fairly new and young member of the council. This is my first BCP chair role, and I'm very much look forward to working with the committee and officers as a team to deliver a suitable working programme to maintain a higher standard of conduct by members of BCP Council and town and parish councils, to monitor the operation of the Code of Conduct, and to impartially consider the outcome of the commissioned independent investigations. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, it's now election of Vice Chairman, so if you wish to invite any nominations for Vice Chairman.
Yes, now we move to election of Vice Chair. So I would like to propose Nigel Brooks. Do we have a seconder, please? I think that was Jane Kelly, seconder. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Yes.
Yes, Councillor Andrews. Yes, I know. Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would like to nominate Councillor Vanessa Ricketts. Thank you.
Richardson. Yes. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ricketts. If we now go to the secret ballot, Max, do you want to? Thank you. So we now have the results. Richard, could you please read the results?
Thank you, Chairman. We now have the results of the election of Vice Chairman of Standards Committee for 2021-22. Results as follows: Councillor Nigel Brooks, 4 votes. Councillor Vanessa Ricketts, 3 votes. Councillor Brooks is elected Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much, Richard. Congratulations, Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. Having joined the Standards Committee about a year ago, I first of all would like to thank Councillor Steve Barron for his leadership over the past year, and I wish you well in your new role. I think it's quite interesting that we have made quite advances over the last year in 2 ways. One is allowing initial investigations of complaints to be undertaken by the monitoring officer. And then secondly, most importantly, is seeing the introduction of the LGA Code of Conduct model, which has been accepted by many local authorities, police authorities, fire authorities, and even parish councils and town councils. So it is with much pleasure that I have to serve you and to serve this council as Vice Chairman of this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigel. So we go to the next item, item 5, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Please can please can you indicate by raising your hand. Okay. Item 6, confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 20th of April. Are there any amendments to the minutes?
I would propose we adopt the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And that's Nigel Brooks, second. Thank you. We move on to item 7, public issues. Are there any public issues at all?
There's no public issues, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. We move on to item 8. It's Code of Conduct Complaints Review. Could I ask the officer, Richard, I believe it is, to present this report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members and the independent members joining us online. This report is the standard report that comes to Standards Committee. Each meeting, it provides an overview of those complaints that have progressed in the last cycle. The last meeting was actually in April that we held. So I draw your attention, I'm not intended to go through the report in detail, but I draw your attention to the table in section 6 of the report, which details those complaints which have been concluded since the last meeting. Those are shown as closed in the final column, and those that are either new or have yet to draw a satisfactory conclusion, and those are shown as pending. You'll note there are 15 complaints that have been closed since the last meeting. I will highlight those again in the annual report, but again, Councillor Brooks made reference to the fact that we've changed the arrangements for dealing with complaints, and a large majority of those have been dealt with by the monitoring officer in that new procedure that allows the monitoring officer to enter into early negotiation to find a satisfactory resolution between the complainant and the subject member. So a large number of those have been dealt with by the monitoring officer. The report is just for information, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on that? Councillor Andy Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in respect of the pending investigations, BCP 21, 22, 39 and 40, they're all got status referring to the complaints being referred for independent investigation. Do we have a status or a progress update on where we are with those, when they're likely to be? Because bear in mind, they go back quite a long way. So it would be good, obviously, if we could try and draw these to a conclusion as swiftly as possible.
They are in the process. They have either been given to an independent investigator who's starting that work, or just about to. So they are still at the early stages of that investigation period, but we hope they will be dealt with fairly promptly. I can't give any further details on that at the moment. That's where we are. We have literally just engaged the independent investigator.
Is it likely we'd have an update on those by October's meeting?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Andrews.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, through you, I'd like to ask Mr. Jones, are we now using the new code of conduct that was formally adopted at the last council meeting? I got supplemental.
The complaints are dealt with under the relevant code that was in place when the alleged offence took place, or alleged breach that took place. So obviously the new code was adopted by council 22nd of June. So any new complaints now of actions during this period will then be under the new code. We're currently in the process, you might be preempting yours, the next question. We're currently in the process of updating all of our complaints literature and complaint forms to categorise the new criteria.
Thank you. And on that, prior to this meeting, I did look at several other councils' websites as to how they deal with complaints in terms of putting it on their website, and they're all different, all various forms of doing it. We've got a form which I think you can actually type on the screen. There is on our website a link where you can click on it to access our code of conduct. Though actually when you do click on it at the moment, you get up on the screen asking you to log on and enter your password. So if you may want to check this after the meeting, this new code of conduct is not actually accessible at the moment on our website. So if that can be done by an IT person, because I'm not an IT person, and it would be useful for members of the public who are thinking or possibly making a complaint or wondering whether a councillor stepped out of line or not, if they could actually access the code of conduct under which we're currently working. Thank you.
Yes, Richard, you want to answer that?
Thank you, Councillor. We will check that link out. The new code is published in the Constitution, Part 6. So it has been updated and it's correct. But if there is a link from elsewhere linking back to that, then I'd appreciate perhaps a copy of the URL so we can check that out.
Thank you. Any more questions? Sorry. Naturally, yes.
Yes, I think it's interesting to note the more recent cases which have now been through our procedure of assessment by the monitoring officer has enabled a lot of the cases to be closed. It's clear the very earlier cases, which members will know were rather complicated and rather involved and needed a lot of investigation, it is those which are still pending. So the proof has been that the process has now enabled a lot of cases to be closed, but we clearly as members do acknowledge that some are somewhat dated, and it would be good to see those closed in due course.
Thank you, Lodge. Yes, it would be good to see them closed. I see there's a few pending, but obviously these matters do take time. Thank you. Yes, Richard.
Councillor Brooks as well. I think just to reiterate on that one, a number of those complaints related to the same incident, or so generated a number of complaints, but again, we're able to nip that in the bud, find a suitable resolution to close those down fairly quickly. Otherwise, they would, as you know, gone to the informal standards panel and dragged out for quite a lengthy period. So certainly the benefit has been reaped on that particular incident.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, sorry. Can we note the report in regards to this? So it's recommended that the outcome of the concluded complaints and the progress of those still outstanding be noted. I'd like a statement as well, if that's okay. So we are asked to note the report, but listening to members this evening, based on the comments made over a huge amount of complaints recorded since April 20th over the 3rd-month period, I would ask that the committee notes the report and ask the monitoring officer to write an open letter to all members, reminding them of the duty under the Code of Conduct regarding not breaching the Code of Conduct, especially around social media areas, not bringing inappropriate and ill-considered complaints to the Standards Committee, If members are content, may I please have a seconder for this proposal?
Yeah, happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. I can go to the vote. And is there anyone for? Yeah. Item agenda 9. I believe you'll read this one, Richard. This is a report.
Indeed, Chairman. This is the annual report on Code of Conduct complaints. So a role of the Standards Committee, and it's in your terms of reference, is to receive an annual report of complaints. And the previous report clearly dealt with the last interim period. This one then draws together the actual data in for the year. Now in 2020 we were unable to bring you an annual report due to the pandemic. We cancelled the Standards Committee, and it was agreed that this report, it was our first year, to be fair, so I had no comparative data. So it was agreed that that meeting was cancelled, and we would bring you technically a 2-year report at this stage. So this report covers the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2019. So again, for the vast majority of those complaints in the previous report, in fact all of them are not included in this data. So I think as we go through this, some of the data might appear quite low, but I can just give you a quick update on some of the figures as we go forward. So again, this year, and it's already been mentioned previously by the councillors adopted the new Code of Conduct, modelled by the LGA, and that's clearly a requirement under the Localism Act. I must thank on behalf of the monitoring officer, who again I should have said already, Chairman, but apologies for this meeting. Thank the independent members for their commitment and support over the 2 years that we've been in operation. That is a statutory requirement to have at least one. We have fortunate to have 3 to support the role, and I think I'm sure members will again thank the independent persons for their activities. As again, it's already been mentioned, but again, I just highlight the fact that we have now changed the arrangements for complaints. The monitoring officer may deal with complaints at an earlier stage, but again, that has not been reflected in this report because that was only introduced really at the end of the, I think it was introduced in March, middle of March 2021. So the impact of that is not in this report, but it certainly will be reflected in the annual report next year. Register of interest for members is updated on the website. It is the councillor's responsibility to update that, a criminal offence, if you don't update that within the 28 days. And we send out, again, members will be aware, we send out a monthly reminder to ask members to check their interests entries and to update it. But again, I would reiterate that it is a councillor's responsibility, not the officer's responsibility to do that reminder, but it's there to assist. Data presented in the report is throughout the report. I will just highlight a few areas. So paragraph 8, the table in paragraph 8 details the total numbers. So we've gone from 17 in 2019-20 to 19 in 2020-21. And again, in relation, I should just highlight that we do investigate clearly complaints relating to parish and town councils. We have 5 parish councils now, parish town councils, with the creation of Throop and Holdenhurst. But the numbers are very low, only 1 in the first year and 2 in the second year. And there's no further data analysis in terms of those particular complaints at this stage. I'm happy to go through the report and then perhaps answer any questions at the end, if that's okay. Just very quickly, we broke down the information a little bit further as well, and this was sparked through reviews of complaints during the last 12 months, really, that we examined the data from the complainant type, whether they are public, councillor or officer. And again, not a huge variance there from, that was sparked in relation to potential councillor complaints, 1 in 2019-20 and 3 in 2020-21. But I would reiterate, and I do highlight in the report, there are still 5 in the pending list or concluded list that will be registered against 2021-22 already. So there is an upward trend, although fairly low in that area. We then did some analysis in terms of the behavioural source. as I've referred to it as, for the complaint, and they're broken down primarily into offences or complaints that originated from either the spoken word, email, social media, lack of response, or other. The other is, as I say in the report, really other actions that could be from conducting meetings. It might be a decision that someone's agreed with rather than the actual behaviour. Again, just to highlight, social media has been quite high in that list. Again, you made reference to that already, Chairman, in your opening remarks. So social media is still there in terms of one of the primary reasons for complainants lodging a complaint. In terms of, I then further, with section 14, we then go into the category for the alleged breach. And again, just to highlight really that the top criteria, if you like, top alleged breaches are failure to treat others with respect, intimidation, potential intimidation, and I would stress the potential intimidation, and the potentially bringing the office or the council into disrepute. Those are the top items that have caused complaints. And then finally in section 15, I then highlight the outcome. So yes, it's positive that the majority of complaints have been dismissed, but any complaint is a perception of dissatisfaction from a customer, and therefore we should try to reduce the complaints that come through. They are time consuming to process, as you all know, through that process. So whilst we have dismissed the vast majority, there are still, for instance, 4 over those 2 years that we have identified a potential breach and identified informal remedies as a conclusion. I'll probably stop there. In terms of the recommendation, it's to note the report and for the committee to identify any areas of further work that they wish to include in a work programme. But I'll leave it there, Chairman, and answer any questions. Thank you.
Is there any questions, anyone? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. The 2 elements that we were very keen to draw attention to when I was up working with the LGA on this as part of the workshops to draft this this code was respect, and the term respect. We felt that that was very important indeed and needed to be highlighted throughout the code of conduct. And also the aspect around social media. The last code of conduct was drafted on the back of the Localism Act 2011, and we considered that there probably wasn't the amount of social media and the amount of use of social media back then. And so it didn't really feature very highly in the original code of conduct. And we wanted to draw attention to that quite specifically in this new code. And I hope that, you know, with councillors now having adopted this new code, that they will take note of this particular section, because it does seem to be quite prevalent that issues do arise on social media. I note as well from the report that there is planned training. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. I understand from Paul Hoey, who worked with the LGA on this, that he submitted the proposals to the LGA for training programmes and the guidance documents. Are you aware, through you, Chairman, Mr. Jones, whether those documents have now been produced and when training for members is likely to happen? Thank you.
I'd like Richard to answer that, if that's possible.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts, for your question. In terms of the training, we're still in the process of identifying the right time for delivering that. Clearly, it would be better if we're in a physical space, but that makes that quite tricky, obviously, at the moment. And I think we will need to proceed with training remotely, probably in groups in that respect. I think we're also we're in dialogue with the DAPTC as well about the training that's been delivered for parish and town councils. I know they're leading on that, but again, having conversations with the chief executive there. Apologies, in terms of the documentation, what was the documentation you referred to, Councillor Ricketts?
It's the LGA guidance that's due to be published. Paul Hoey advised through the SLCC that it should be by the end of June, but obviously LGA appear to be dragging their feet somewhat on that at the moment.
I've received, again, probably like yourself, I've received lots of alerts, but not the actual link to the document yet, but we will keep an eye out. So I'm following those, and I have
Thank you.
That's a favourite.
Thank you. And any more questions, Councillor Marcus?
Thanks, Chairman. I've got some questions, then I'd like to probably come back. You mentioned obviously we've got 5 parish councils. Some authorities have lots of town councils or parish councils. I think I'm right in assuming that they will have to now deal or make use of the new code of conduct that we've adopted. So hopefully they've been told all about it and have put it on their websites. In terms of the training, obviously the parish councillors, probably town councillors as well, need help and training, though possibly something that we could do as an authority is offer some potential training for the 5 town clerks, so those 2 of the parish councils in Christchurch share it. There will be only 4 people. That will help them, because obviously there can be no excuse that you didn't abide by the rules if you didn't know what the rules were, because we've adopted them, so they've probably adopted. So is there some help that we can give to the parish councillors, please?
Through you, Chairman. Indeed, I have met with the clerks to each of the parish councils, parish and town councils. We have a sort of a quarterly catch up, and I drew to their attention the fact that the council had adopted the model code of conduct with the minor change, and provided them with the link to our code. They don't have to adopt that particular code. We are encouraging it, but it is for each parish and town council to determine which code they adopt. But again, DAPTC is also recommending Dorset adopted the same code, so they are recommending that code is adopted. In terms of the training, that will be delivered by DAPTC, but we're working with the Chief Executive to contribute to that process.
Thank you. An observation to make is a problem that we've had as a standards committee over the past couple of years is, though we've occasionally found people to be in the wrong, and we've asked several councillors or certain councillors to apologise, our sanctions as a committee, as a council even, are very limited. And we have been frustrated by some councillors refusing, in our view, to apologise. I've got something written out here. It's prepared because it's somebody else's words, but I read it at the weekend and I think it's very relevant. It should become the norm, enforced by legal action if necessary, that local councillors either resign or are removed from their post for a fixed period if they are found to have contravened their authority's code of conduct. No such provision exists, and this means that councillors found guilty of racism, sexism, homophobia can continue in their role. This unconscionable practice legitimises bad behaviour, low standards and poor governance. If we are to attract a wider demographic person to stand in elections, and we've got them in less than 2 years, we must redouble our efforts to make the environment they enter as safe as possible. So obviously this is beyond our powers to bring in abilities to suspend councillors or whatever. Though again, in the research that I did very quickly over the weekend, some councillors, their code of conduct does actually give the powers to perhaps suspend a councillor from their powers for several months. In fact, I do remember Councillor Stribley, who unfortunately cannot be here today, that she mentioned about one councillor who had misused his laptop, where this is one of the former authorities, it was actually taken away from him and then returned after a set period of time. So, this is going to be a frustration for the new councillors on this committee, that you may well find that somebody is in the wrong, but our powers to discipline councillors is limited, and we can name and shame them, but we can't do any more. Thank you.
Richard, would you like to respond to that?
Again, I think the sanctions are difficult, but there are sanctions that you can restrict access to certain facilities by members, and your example there of the council resources or the laptop, historically, that's certainly been imposed by a number of authorities. You can restrict, for instance, access to certain parts of the accommodation. So I know some councils have imposed a restriction on councillors accessing a certain office containing certain officers because of the conduct there in other authorities and so on. I would just draw your attention though to the new code and Section 8, which is complying with the code. There is now, and all councillors have agreed to this, 8.4 says, I comply with any sanctions imposed on me following a finding that I have breached the code of conduct. So that wasn't in the previous code, but that is strengthened, that there is now a commitment to comply. So whilst we've seen some issues over the last 12 months, I think we as a committee or chairman, you can probably call upon Section 8.4 in future decisions.
Can I just come back, Mr. Chairman? So if, for example, thinking about a couple of examples historically where we actually asked a councillor to write a letter of apology, let's say to a member of the public, but the councillor refused to do it, that's it. You know, we can't do any more than that. If they say no, that's it.
Through you, Chairman, I don't wish to necessarily get into the detail of individual complaints at this point, but clearly that is still going to be a bit of an issue, but there are ongoing complaints in some of those regards, and I think there are other options the informal panel are considering in terms of the route to report those. But I do accept that the sanctions are limited at the moment, and I know there is a move to strengthen those, and Councillor Ricketts clearly being involved in a high level in some of these conversations, I'm sure is party to some of those conversations.
Sorry, Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you. Yes, I can confirm that we are continuing to lobby LGA and government to change the legislation that's required. It does require a primary legislation change to change the sanctions as they are set out in law. Unlike the code, which could be done as a guidance, sanctions are in Local Government Act 2011, and it is that legislation that needs to be changed in order for stronger sanctions with teeth, whatever you want to call them, to actually be implemented. But we are continuing to lobby. There are various petitions around on the internet, on Twitter, through the LGA, through various professional bodies around the work of democratic services, and also the SLCC. And as many people as possible really should be signing those, including councillors, because I think it's really important that if we've got a strong code, we need strong sanctions to go with them. So all I would suggest is that members have a look to find those petitions up, which are online, and perhaps add their signatures to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Borthwick.
Yeah, I find it terribly frustrating to come up here, spend hours trying to get this acknowledgement or some recognition of this committee. At the present time, I thought we were going to really crack down on these councillors. Surely, if they want this committee, they've got to sign an agreement to accept our ruling time all this other procedures going on elsewhere, because otherwise it's going to be another 2 years before anything really happens. So I really get frustrated that people don't recognise us, and I feel that we should do or think about getting an agreement made up with democratic services to ensure that each councillor acknowledges and accepts BCP's disciplines right on this procedure. It is so frustrating. That's what I would do with them.
Thank you. Any more questions? Well done. Okay. Councillor Brett.
Thank you, Joe. It's more observations following on from what Councillor Marcus Andrews has been saying. We are both chartered surveyors. We are professionals in our discipline, And we simply have to sign codes of conduct and standards of performance. And if one breaches those, effectively they have sanctions to take you out of a professional qualification, certainly for a period of time. It's also interesting in other professions. In law, they are similarly recognizing that social media has caused immense problems. And I read only in June a very interesting article from barristers about some guidance about how one should actually deal with social media. And I'd just like to read you just now 2 words of advice from barristers, which I found quite interesting, to do with social media. The first one said, "My general rule of thumb is to ask myself if I would be happy for a judge or my mother to see what I'm tweeting. That usually keeps me in check." I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? The second one, "My personal filter is to picture a strict audience and, if it might backfire, be controversial, or lead to misunderstanding, don't press send." And I think they're very wise words for councillors of this authority to recognise that we have had too many complaints around aspects of social media. And I think those 2, I'll call them words of wisdom, really ring to me that people really need to actually keep in check. Maybe being a keyboard warrior, that sometimes it is not at all sensible to send a tweet or something on social media.
Chairman, I have nothing further to add. I appreciate Councillor Brooks's insight into that. I mean, the report is before you. The recommendation is to receive the report, but to consider whether there's any further work that you would wish to identify for inclusion on the forward plan.
Can I propose we adopt the report, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry?
Can I propose that we adopt and accept the recommendation as set out?
Yes, so it's recommended on this item the annual report of the Code of Conduct complaints be reviewed and any areas of further work be identified for inclusion in the work programme. I will ask the clerk next note down contributions from the floor for any further works to be added to the Standards Committee programme. I think I've already read that. I'm sorry, apologies. Thank you, members, for your contributions. I'll ask you, clerk, to read out any items raised during our debate so they can be included in our work programme.
So just in terms of the work programme, clearly we're going to deliver the training. So I think clearly that's something that you would wish to see. I'm sure in terms of in terms of any other items, I'm not sure anything has been drawn out in terms of a inclusion on the work programme. Clearly we're going to monitor the LGA for documentation when that comes out in terms of guidance, and clearly the messages that we deliver in terms of that training. I'm sure we will engage with members of the committee in terms of the delivery and maybe involve members in that delivery, and the commitment from members to sign up to the code. And clearly council has adopted the code, so by doing so councillors have signed up to the code already, so it is the council's code of conduct that's been voted on.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Jane Kelly. Oh, sorry, Rickett. Sorry, Councillor. So apologies. Always in favour? None of us. Last item. So. So sorry about that. I'm a bit nervous today. It's the first time being chair, so I do apologise if I've been a bit up and down here. So thank you very much, members and officers, for your support and guidance this evening. I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting, which I believe is the 5th of October at 6 p.m. Thank you.